history? Yeah, I get that a lot. When, do not say anything, Margaret. He will call on you. Shut up. Keep your hand down, Margaret. History. All right, let's try some Bible history. All right, we're not going to go all the way back to the beginning. The beginning, you would find it in what book? Genesis. Very good. All right, so we're gonna skip about the first 12 chapters or so. So we're going to start with Father Abraham. Father Abraham. He is a patriarch. He starts the whole thing. Abraham gets promised 3 things by God. What's one of the things that God promises Abraham? Land. Wonderful. The promised land. Okay, so he gets land. What else does he get a promise for? What did I hear? Many nations. Many nations, all right. What else does he get a promise for? Lots of children. Yes. And Abraham is up there in age, right? So Abraham he'll say, you get lots of descendants. And he's also promised lots of blessings. So Abraham and Sarah, they have a baby. Sarah's about, Abraham and Sarah are about 80 or whatever, and they have a kid. And then they have their kid, and the kid's name is who? Isaac. Isaac means laughter, right? Remember last week I talked about Sarah being 80, and I asked if anyone here was 80 years old, and how would you like to be pregnant? Yeah, and that was the women who was laughing. That's what Sarah did too. Although she said, oh, am I to have the enjoyment once again? So I'm not sure where that's coming from, but regardless. All right, so they have a kid. The name is Isaac. His name is Laughter. Isaac has 2 kids, a pair. What are their names? Jacob and Esau. Okay, we're going to call them Harry and Jake. Okay, Esau means hairy. That's literally. And Jacob, we're going to call him Jake. Does anyone have a Jake in their family? Or know a Jake? Or is anyone here a Jake? You're a Jake? Is he a trickster? Yes. That's what Jake means, a trickster. Exactly. You were probably named because of that. Even as a young man, they knew who you were going to be. Jake. Jake is a trickster. I remember our son Barry had a friend whose name was Jake, and yeah, whatever. He was my parents nicknamed him Ugg, because that's about all he'd say when he'd come in. He was a big football player. Anyway, and he was a trickster. Now Jacob has a bunch of kids, 12 sons. Who are the sons? Anyone name all 12? Okay, who's the favorite of all 12? Joseph, exactly. How many of you seen Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat? Yeah, that's who we're talking about. It's also in print now. It's called the Bible. It's been a bestseller, so if you check it out, if you haven't gone to the Chanhassen to see it, it's in the print, so it's in there. But some of the songs are missing. Regardless, okay, so Joseph. Now Jacob is in the Promised Land, and Joseph is the one who gets sold into slavery by his brothers. Remember? And where does Joseph get carted off to? Egypt, the land of Egypt. And it's over there that Jacob and the rest of his family come over to Egypt. Remember, there's famine in the land. And so Joseph's brothers come over and say, we were hungry and we're hoping you can help us out and all that. Well, so now we're over in Egypt. Jacob and all his family, all the descendants of Abraham are over there in Egypt, and we stay there for 400 years. 400 years. That's a long time. Now, we are in the book. We're going over from the book of Genesis, and the next book is what? Oh, I wish I heard more people say what that was. The next book is what? Exodus. Very good, Exodus. If not, you can just go ahead and get in your Bibles right now and just Margaret, he's going to ask us what the next one is too, so you might as well get all. All right, so we're in Exodus. Who's the main dude of the Exodus? Moses. Moses, remember, is born as a Hebrew slave. His mom wants to save him from dying because the Pharaoh says there's too many of those little Hebrews running around, so we're going to get rid of some of them. So he says, we're going to get rid of all these kids, And Moses' mother saves him by floating him down the Nile. Pharaoh's daughter picks him up. He gets raised in the temple court. And then from there, he kills an Egyptian and gets sent away, and he goes into the land of Goshen. There he sees that burning bush. Remember the burning bush from last Sunday? And God says, go save my people. I heard their cries. And so Moses says, yes, I want to go. No, that's not what Moses said, is it? Moses said, send somebody else. But does he go? He does. So he goes into the land of Egypt. He goes down to Pharaoh. Downtown Pharaoh's, eventually Pharaoh gets tired of him, says, go away from here. I don't want to see you again. So they go, and then they wander around in the wilderness for how long? 40 years. 40 years. Moses does not get to see the promised land. He doesn't get to go in it. He does get to see it. He has to go up on a mountain and he gets to see it, but he doesn't get to cross over. Instead, God says to Moses, I am sending someone else. I am going to send Joshua. Joshua is also in the story of Exodus. You'll find him when he's sent into the land along with 11 other guys, and he and Caleb are the ones who come out of the promised land and say, yes, there are some pretty big people in there, but God is with us. And the rest of them said, yeah, they're pretty big people, and we don't want to go. So that's why they ended up 40 years. And Moses is the one who actually changes Joshua's name. His original name is Hoshea, and that means salvation. So Moses changes his name to Yeshua, which isn't meaning that Yeshua. I want to go there. Yeshua. I'll wait. I know. Thank you, Nancy, for the wonderful laughter, trying to start everybody else. Yeshua. All right, so Yeshua, which means the Lord saves. Moses wanted to make sure that Joshua knew who was saving. That Yeshua is the Hebrew name. In the Greek, you would say that same name, Jesus. Yeshua and Jesus, the same name. God says to Joshua, you will lead these people across the Jordan and into the promised land. Now, Joshua probably learned from Moses and didn't say no. But this is after Moses has died. We are now in the book of Joshua. So we did the first 5 books, right? Genesis. Deuteronomy. I just like making people say Deuteronomy. It's kind of fun. All right, so now we're in the book of Joshua. And this is what God is saying to Joshua. I want you to lead the people. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for I am with you. We had a holiday a few days ago. What holiday was that? 4th of July. Celebrating what? Our independence. Our independence from who? From England. Okay. Well, before the English came over and basically colonized the states, or what we know as the states, there were this group of people called the Pilgrims. Some came from England. Some of them had already been banished over to Holland. And then they decided that they came here for a number of reasons, one of which most of us remember is for religious freedom. So about in the 1500s, somewhere, some of them were coming before what we call the official Pilgrims coming, but they showed up on these shores and they were looking for freedom. Now, they met some people when they were here, right? Somebody who had been here a lot longer than them. But for us, we're gonna track the Pilgrims for a moment. So they're here long before it ever becomes a nation. Now, we're going to advance forward about 200 years, not quite, about 200 years, and we're going to go into Philadelphia, and we're going to go into Independence Hall, where there's a bunch of folks that we know as our forefathers, right? There's a whole bunch of folks. Have you ever seen the painting of the signing of the Declaration of Independence? Okay, the signing, everybody's there signing, and who's got the big handwriting on there? Right. Now, I want you to know that painting is a fallacy. Because we know that not all those folks were in the same room at the same time signing the Declaration of Independence. They would come into Philadelphia whenever they could, and they would sign their name to the document. But regardless, this is what it meant. It meant that we finally were going to say to the British, we are going to be our own nation. Now, when I was a kid learning history, I thought, well, yeah, everybody was in an agreement. That here's the date that we signed it, and then from there we just became a free nation. That's kind of the end of the story. I didn't know much about the Revolutionary War or those kinds of things. Did you know that when they met, there was no real agreement? There was fighting. In politics, can you imagine? Politics, fighting. And they were bickering back and forth. Some of the Southerners didn't want, the Southerners said, Massachusetts, this is your war. We have no real beef with the British. They kind of stay out of our hair, and this is for you. We're not going to get involved in that. And it took a lot of finesse in order for this group of people to finally come together and say, yes, we will become this sovereign nation. There was still a lot of disagreement, even when they signed the thing. They said, one of the things they said, we need an army. They had not an army. There was nothing to fight the British with. The British were the world dominion power. There was nothing that could stop the British. And here we are without even an army, and we say we are going to go up against the biggest military power in the whole world. Who would like to sign on to be the leader of the armed forces? Nobody raised their hand. But the men in that room knew who should be the leader. Who'd they pick? They picked George Washington. Now, if you are a student of the Revolutionary War or any of those folks in there, you will know that George Washington, although he was a very good military commander, well, not at the beginning of the war, he really stunk at the beginning of the war, but he did not want to become the commander-in-chief. He did not want it. But he accepted it. He said, and he was very humble about it. If you have chosen me to be your leader, then I will do so. Oh, I don't know how many letters he wrote to Congress trying to get some money or to get people. His army were militia folks. Militia, I watched The Patriot. Has anyone watched The Patriot? Mel Gibson. I just watched it on the 4th of July. Mel Gibson, and he's this leader of this militia. Militia weren't trained army folks. They were people from the houses around there basically to try to keep the army going or just defend your little town. They weren't the best of soldiers, and they certainly were not what George Washington was accustomed to. But that's who was assigned to him to go against the biggest power of the world. A lot like Joshua. A lot like Joshua. Do you hear what God is telling Joshua? Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for I am with you. Yeah. You know there are giants on the other side of that river. You know that they have armies, and you have been around for 40 years in the wilderness, eating nothing but manna and quail, and I'm going to have you go against some of the biggest military powers of that time. If you were Joshua, would you want to go? Not me. But God says, do not be discouraged. Do not be afraid. I am with you. Now, most of us here in this room probably won't have to lead an army across the Jordan River or any other army for all that matters, but all of us have faced giants. All of us. Some of you have faced it with relationships. Some of you have faced it with disease. Some of you have faced it with loss of jobs. Some of us have faced it with just plain wonderment about what's coming next and not knowing, like me. This is what God says to us. Do not be discouraged. Do not be afraid. I am with you. We have two little dogs. They're a Shih Tzu Westie mix. So they're about this high. They're brother and sister. Lady is definitely the leader, and Goliath. And because he's such a big dog that we had to name him Goliath. He's the runt of the litter, and he looks ferocious because he has this underbite. If you come to our house, they will not welcome you. That's our dogs. But especially during this past week, our dogs are afraid. They hear boom, they hear poof, 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 poof. Goliath will come and hide underneath your feet, and Lady will just wander around wherever you are. And on the 4th of July, it was even worse because Goliath was shaking. He was so afraid. We tried Benadryl. He was still very afraid. We had to, everywhere we went, he would be right there with you. He hid in my closet. We had to take out my clothes hamper so he could hide in the closet. So finally, at 10 o'clock at night, while all those wonderful fireworks are going off at Sand Creek, I'm laying in bed with Goliath next to me, right here, and he's underneath the covers, and he is literally shaking. And I just keep petting him. It's all right. It's okay. It's all right. And finally, he goes off to sleep. I don't know how I got this moniker, but I have become Goliath's dad. But all of us are safe within our dad's arms. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. I am with you. I will never leave.